Grüß, willkommen in einer Frankens video. Welcome to another exciting video, in this case episode 3 of my equipment series of videos. This video will cover French medium tanks of World War II. As with my other videos, I'm going to attempt to provide an overview of the armoured vehicles in the French army in 1940, in this case specifically medium tanks. In May 1940 the French only fielded 2 medium tanks, one in reasonably low numbers as it was being replaced. On the other hand, the number of prototypes and tanks in development was rather large, and by June 1940 the French were throwing everything they could get their hands on into battle, including some of these tanks under development. Let's now go through the medium tanks, first starting with the earliest one. The French plan of 1926 called for the creation of a light infantry support tank. This led to the development of the existing Renault NC1 prototype, which then turned into the Char D1. 160 vehicles of this type was produced between 1931 and 1935. There were 10 pre-series vehicles, and later 150 standard vehicles were built. Until 1936, these vehicles were fitted with the Renault FT turrets because the intended cast ST2 turrets had not yet been ready or produced. The ST2 turrets were armed with a short 47mm SA34 tank gun with a coax 7.5mm machine gun. The hull carried a 7.5mm MG in the bow. This type did not serve as an infantry support tank as originally intended, but instead as France's major battle tank or medium tank of the early 1930s. It was quickly phased out in 1937 because of its mechanical unreliability and relegated to colonial units in North Africa. As the initial ST1 turret type, in terms of the development of the Char D1 medium tank, had been rejected, a new one had to be developed. Until it was ready, all 160 Char D vehicles were temporarily fitted with existing Renault FT turrets, similar to the FT-17, taken from the Renault FT material reserve. When the replacement to the original ST1 turret had been developed, which was called the ST2, this quickly replaced the temporary FT turrets. The ST2 turret was armed with a 47mm gun, which gave it reasonably good anti-tank capabilities. This ST2 turret had a very complex geometry with many shot traps, as well as being rather awkward for the crew. The army was very critical of this general arrangement, but it could not be rejected as deliveries were already greatly delayed. The first replacement turrets were fitted only in early 1936. In March 1934, when 110 vehicles had already been delivered, it was reported that 17 of these vehicles were already worn out and had to be returned to the factory for a complete rebuild. Of the remaining 93, 62 were non-operational because of major defects. The fundamental cause of this was that the Renault design team tended to solve the problem of how to combine low weight and low cost by applying weak components of inferior steel quality, which caused significant mechanical issues. In 1935, a large maintenance program was started to improve the Char D1's mechanical reliability. Due to the perceived mechanical or the actual mechanical unreliability of the initial Char D1s, in the 1930s, even before the Char T had not entered full production, the Renault company agreed to build a better armoured version called the Char D2 with better reliability. By not using old-fashioned rivets, it was hoped to save weight and the vehicle should have the potential to also serve as an alternative in the role of battle tank for the heavier Char B1 if required. Organisational difficulties with Renault caused the actual production of the first series of 50 of this new vehicle to be delayed to the years 1936 and 1937. A second series of 50 were ordered in 1938, despite indications that the type was still mechanically unreliable, as a possible cheaper addition to the expensive Char B1, although this tank was never deployed in the DCR divisions. The DCR divisions were the actual armoured divisions, which contained the Char B1s. With the latter type, in case of war, only a limited number of armoured divisions for the infantry arm could be raised. The Char D2 created the prospect of increasing the number of actual armoured divisions. Now, the French never went down this path, but they were thinking about it as an alternative option. Due to Renault's financial problems, this second, partially improved version was only completed in early 1940, bringing the total production to about 100. In essence, the Char D2 was an improved Char D1. The main improvements was related to mechanical reliability while maintaining the reduced weight and the additional capacity to act as a heavy tank if the number of armoured divisions were to be expanded. Like with the Char D1, there was a crew of 3 in the Char D2, but the radio operator sat to the right of the driver instead of the commander, and the antenna of the ER-52 set had been moved to a position next to him. A machine gun was also removed. This new configuration had been demanded by the Army to create a roomier fighting compartment. The commander was the sole occupant of the APX-1 turret. He also acted as a gunner and loader for the 47mm SA-34 gun, which had a limited anti-tank capability, and the optionally coaxial 7.5mm machine gun. The gun, the anti-tank gun, could fire 2 types of ammunition: a high-explosive shell called the OBUS-D with a muzzle velocity of 490 meters per second, and an armoured-piercing high-explosive, the OBUS-B Model 1932, with a muzzle velocity of 480 meters per second. The first 50 vehicles were delivered between the 9th of May 1936 and the 23rd of February 1937. On the 10th of April 1937, the Ministry of Defence decided to place a second order of 50 vehicles. This second production series featured several improvements. The most important of these was the fitting of the APX-4 turret, equipped with the longer SA-35 gun, also 47mm, which had a far better anti-tank capability, with about twice the original armoured penetration, mainly due to a longer cartridge, higher muzzle velocity. Due to the longer rounds, the ammunition load had decreased to 108 rounds. Analogous to the Char B1 Biz designation for a similarly improved second Char B1 version, some internal unit documents in 1940 began to refer to the second series as the Char D2 Biz, but this was never an official name. The D2s were organised into 13 tank companies, with a battalion consisting of 44 D2s in total. Each DLM, that's the mechanised divisions, would have had 2 such battalions. These tanks were replaced with the Somua S35s when the S35s became available. The AMC-34 was a French tank originally built for the French Army's cavalry units, divisions specifically. Its production was cut short, and the few vehicles produced were out of service by the time of the Battle of France in the Second World War. While actually light, they were utilised as medium cavalry tanks. The AMC-34 was a small vehicle with a length of 3.98 metres and a width of 2.07 metres. The suspension of the prototype is identical to that of the AMR-33. The production vehicles used a type that was originally envisaged for the AMR-35, that is, the chassis, or the suspension, a central bogie with vertical spring, 2 other wheels in front and behind, and an oil-dampening horizontal spring. 12 pre-series vehicles were built using the FT turret armed with a 37mm gun. None of these vehicles ever saw service, as they were considered as unsuitable for combat. However, France, having such a lack of modern tanks, could not afford to forget the 12 pre-series vehicles that had been built. In January 1936, they were taken into use with the 4th Cuirassiers, at first fitted with gun turrets removed from Renault FTs, and then with the APX-1 turret, which also used for the Char D2, armed with the SA-34 47mm gun. By 1937, the growing production of more modern tanks allowed these hybrid or ad hoc AMC-34 hulls to be shipped from France to Morocco to be used by the 1st Regiment Chasseurs d'Afrique, which received them on the 15th of December 1937. They were at the time the most modern armoured vehicles in the colonies, but were refitted with a 2-man APX-2 turret. It took many months before 25mm guns could be fitted as well. Until that time, the tanks drove around with just the 7.5mm machine gun. The ACC-38 was a prototype tank only, armed with the 25mm and 47mm gun. It eventually became the AMC-35. The ACC-38, the correct name being ACG-1/25, was the prototype of the AMC-35 armed with a 25mm anti-tank gun. But as there were few 25mm guns available, it was then decided to use an alternative main armament. Instead of the 25mm anti-tank gun, it was decided to arm the vehicle with the much more numerous 47mm gun, and in this case it was called the ACG-1/47. Only one of each vehicle was ever produced. The AMC-35, also known under a manufacturer's designation Renault ACG-1, was a French medium cavalry tank. It was developed as a result of the change of the specification that had led to the design of the AMC-34, calling for a vehicle that was not only well armed and mobile, but also well armoured. Due to technological and financial problems, production was delayed and limited. The AMC-35 was one of the few French tanks of the period featuring a two-man turret. Renault had originally developed the AMC-34 according to the specification of the Plan 1931. On the 26th of June 1934, the plan was changed. It was now demanded that the vehicle attain a maximum speed of 50 km an hour and be immune to anti-tank guns, requiring additional armour. On the 7th of March 1936, a changed prototype was delivered by Renault, who requested that the vehicle would be accepted if it met the new specification. After all, the AMC-34s had already been accepted for production, and this was nothing but a slightly changed variant. Renault felt it didn't need to go through extensive trials. However, the French Material Commission became suspicious by the fact that the factory designation had been changed from a Renault YR to the Renault ACG. When the Commission inspected the prototype on the 9th of March, it would transpire that it was actually a completely new design. Accordingly, a complete test program was ordered, which was finished on the 27th of November. At this date, the Commission judged that despite many changes, the type was still unfit for service due to its mechanical unreliability. However, already in the spring, the cavalry, worried by the German remilitarization of the Rhineland, had first ordered 17 vehicles and later expanded the order to 50 regardless. For political reasons, the Commission did not dare to cancel this order. It accepted the type, noting that it would be highly advisable to test types in future before ordering anything. The first vehicle was received by the cavalry on the 1st of November 1938. The AMC-35 had about the same dimensions as the AMC-34. The prototype had a two-man APX-2 turret with the commander, loader on the left and the gunner on the right. It was fitted with a 25mm SARF Fortress gun and a 7.5mm machine gun. Unfortunately, all the 25mm anti-tank guns were needed in the Maggio line. So, in the production series, the 47mm SA-35 gun was used instead. This roughly octagonal APX-2 turret consisted of cast sections welded, riveted and bolted together. The tank carried 120 rounds and 5,250 machine gun rounds. At the beginning of the war, or at least the German invasion, no French units were equipped with the AMC-35 and no crews were trained on that type. After the German breakthrough at Sedan, it was decided on the 15th of May to send the entire tank material reserve to the front line. Several ad hoc units were hastily formed as a result. First, 12 AMC-35s were used to equip the 11th Group, the cavalry, which is normally a corps-level formation that was allocated as required. Then 5 corps motorised formations were formed, each to be equipped with 7 tanks, but only 5 AMCs could be first made ready for each of these formations. 7 more were later added. The crews reported that the material was unreliable and suffered from extremely short range in rough terrain. The CFMs fought a delaying action between the river Seine and Lorraine. The AMX-38 was a prototype French tank developed in 1937 at the AMX Works, designed as AMX's response to the 20-ton tank program intended to replace the aging Char D2. It was faster and a heavier alternative to Renault's R35. in practice a crossover between a light tank and a medium tank. The AMX-38 was designed to have better mobility than the Char D1, while having the same armour and a small weight increase. It was planned to have a 100 horsepower CLM diesel engine, 37mm SA-18 gun, and the new APX/R turret. When the first prototype of the AMX-38 was completed at the end of 1939, it differed vastly from the initial design. The vehicle was equipped with a 37mm SAA gun and a 7.5mm machine gun. The weight of the first prototype was 13.5 tonnes. It had a 130 HP Aster engine and a power weight ratio of 9.62 horsepower to tonne. The maximum speed of the first prototype was 25 km an hour. The turret was replaced by one designed by AMX, which closely resembled the turret of the FCM-36. The crew consisted of 2 people, a driver and a commander gunner. The AMX-38's first prototype was proved to be inferior to other current French tanks, both in armour and armament. As a result, the AMX company continued to redesign and improve the AMX-38. In December 1939, the second prototype was constructed. It was armed with the 47mm SA-35 gun, replacing the older 37mm SA-38 gun. The gun had better penetration and could destroy any German tank of that period. Additionally, the frontal armour and hull armour was increased to 60mm, which was impenetrable by the standard German 3.7cm Pak 36. The second prototype weight increased to 16.5 tonnes. The suspension had to be changed and the engine was upgraded to the more powerful Aster engine of 160 horsepower. While trials of both prototypes were underway when war broke out, unfortunately for this vehicle, the project was abandoned after the fall of France for obvious reasons. The AMX-39 was also a French prototype medium tank. This project, initiated in August 1939 by AMX, was a medium tank of infantry equipped with a traditional running gear and included 14 road wheels. The AMX-39 was a medium tank specifically designed for the infantry. Its length was 5.96 metres and its height 2.56 metres. Its crew was to be composed of 4 men. The principal armament was to be the 47mm SA, a lengthened barrelled version, that is to say the SA-37 or the SA-39, it was never specifically confirmed, in the turret, which had extremely good anti-tank penetration capability. The Somua S35 was a French cavalry tank of the Second World War. Built from 1936 to 1940 to equip the armoured divisions of the cavalry, it was for its time a relatively agile medium-weight tank, superior in armour and armaments to its French and foreign competition, such as the contemporary versions of the Panzer III medium tank. It was constructed from well-sloped, mainly cast armour sections that, however, made it expensive to produce and time-consuming to maintain. The first S-35 vehicles had a standard APX-1 turret fitted with a short 47mm SA-34 gun. The Army did not consider this a standard vehicle. On the 25th of March 1936, the turret was upgraded, the AC-4 turret, and this new vehicle was accepted as the standard medium tank of the French cavalry when the first order for 50 was made. While the original vehicles were equipped with the 47mm SA-34 gun, the mass-produced vehicles would have the longer SA-35 gun, which proved superior or had superior anti-tank capability. Originally, a total or production of 600 were planned to provide each of the 3 cavalry armoured divisions with 200 tanks each. Later, budgetary restraint led to a more gradual and limited procurement. In 1936, the second order was made of 50, followed by 100 in 1937, and 2 orders of 125 each in 1938, resulting in total pre-war production of 450 units. 4 tanks of the AC-4 pre-series of the S-35 entered service in January 1936 with the 4th Cuirassiers. On the 15th of April 1937, the first 2 hulls of the main series left the factory. These, produced at the planned rate of 12 per month, still had to be joined with their turrets. At the end of 1937, the SA-35 gun finally became available, and deliveries of finished tanks of the main production series could now begin. On the 15th of January 1938, only 4 Somua S35s were operational. By July 1938, 128 hulls had been delivered, but only 96 guns were completed, or 96 tanks were completed with turrets. In the spring of 1939, the number of operational tanks had increased to 192, the 2 armoured divisions of the cavalry having obtained their nominal strength. On the 1st of September 1939, the start of the war, 270 had been produced and 246 delivered. On this date, 191 served with the troops, 51 were in depot, and 4 had been sent back to the factory for overhaul. The Somua S35s were organised into 13 tank companies, with a battalion consisting of 44 S35s in total. Each DLM, that is mechanised division, would have had 2 such battalions. During the German invasion in 1940, only the S-35s were formally being used in the DLM divisions as medium tanks, with the S-35s having fully replaced the older D2s that had served earlier. However, due to the emergency, the French still deployed everything they possessed. Thus, these D2s were brought back into ad hoc units of company size, not specifically deployed into the DLMs. And so we come to a close of my episode 3 equipment series of videos, in this case covering French World War II medium tanks. Alle guten Dinge, kommen zu einem Ende.